the the deck that gained the most from Cavern of Souls in terms of really wanting its threat to be uncounterable is the
Wolf
ramp
Run.
deck,
Yeah.
Wolf Run. But there are a bunch of other decks that already were fairly tribal that gain a lot in terms of splashability and in terms of kind of incidental uncounterability, as you were talking about the zombies. And then we also have a human deck this round from Christian Calcano. On your right, wearing the hat. It looks like we're looking at green-white humans, and we do see
earlier.
4 of Cavern of Souls.
Yeah, we saw Christian play earlier, and the 2 games he won on the play on turn 4 with Athalia.
Ooh.
So his deck is fast. Very, very, very fast. If he has a champion of the parish draw, he can just come out of the gates and run people over. Jim, on the other hand, Jim is playing an Esper control deck. Some of you may not be entirely sure who Jim Davis is. He's a bit of an older player. Yep. Jim has multiple Grand Prix top 8s. He's widely known as the best Goblins player.
Yeah, and
of all
Jim,
time, ever.
At the Invitational in Indianapolis last year, Jim actually ground in at the last minute and then made top 8. Made an impact.
And just an incredible player. Somebody who... the way Magic works now, Magic has become a much more combat-oriented game as far as Standard goes. And Limited's always been that way.
The creatures just keep getting better.
Yeah, a lot of people are uncomfortable when they're put into that situation where they have these clogged up boards and they need to figure out the combat and they need to figure out like what the best attack is or what the best block is. It's a lot of thought required every single turn. And most people have been playing Magic for forever, a lot of the time haven't been forced to do that. Which now in Standard you are forced to do that. And Jim's somebody who the types of decks that he's loved to play over the years have always been combat-oriented decks.
He wants to be turning guys sideways
right now. So it's funny that he's playing Esper Control here, but
it's interesting to see that he'll be on the other side of this with Christian coming out of the gates with the Champion of the Parish, Doom Traveler, Avacyn's Pilgrim. A lot more turn 1 plays from Christian, and Jim playing Goblins was always tap and land on turn 1. Not going to be happening with this Esper control deck.
No, it doesn't look like it. Now, something that's interesting about Jim's deck is really all in on Sun Titan. He's like an Unburial Rites Sun Titan deck. So much so that instead of playing a card like Tragic Slip that's become just the absolute norm in these Esper control decks, he's playing Deadweight instead because that's a removal spell that he can return with a Sun Titan.
Yeah.
Something that's really interesting about that is when you return the Deadweight from a Sun Titan, you can actually kill a Geist of St. Traff with it. Because even though the Geist of St. Traff is untargetable, the enchantment is coming into play from the graveyard, and it's not actually targeting something, you just put it onto something.
Yeah, you choose what to enchant when an aura comes into play.
But
the only
time you target something is when you cast it.
Yeah, the only time that an aura is a targeted spell is when you're casting it.
So it's a very interesting way for Jim to deal with creatures that are generally hard to deal with.
Yep, and you do see a fair amount of hexproof. There's a lot of kind of Hexblade, green, white, blue, a bunch of kind of different twists on Hexblade as you've seen the Soulbond creatures that have come in and really given an alternative to swords. Swords are highly powerful cards, some of the defining cards in the format, but the format has shifted a little bit to be able to handle them. You don't see many decks that, especially after sideboard, don't have ways to deal with swords. It actually gets a little bit more complicated when you have, your pump is tied to a creature instead.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that might be one of the biggest things that's holding back decks like red-green aggro that I think when I first saw the spoiler, I was like, well, red-green aggro gets, Zealous Conscripts, and, it also has Cavern of Souls now, so it just made its Delver matchup better, and now it can actually beat the Wolf Run decks. But the big problem with that is that's the big thing that keeps red-green in the game is that it's the best sword deck. It's a deck that plays a ton of swords and has birds and elves, so that it can just cast its swords faster than the opponent and stick them on things. But, swords, people have answers to. And with red-green becoming more and more popular, you're going to expect a lot of Ancient Grudges post-board.
And so Christian leads off with a Doom Traveler, passes over to Jim. Jim's Dark Slip Shores stays untapped.
Yep, and I think he's going to have a Thought Scour on Christian's end step.
Yep.
Start filling his graveyard up with Think Twices and Forbidden Alchemies.
Christian gets in for 1 and gathers Townfolk.
So
finding some humans, picking out who he wants to bring out.
Both of them are human.
By some definitions of the word. Jim's got his Sun Titan in hand. Thought Scour at the end of turn. Flipped Ratchet Bomb and Plains into his graveyard.
And it looks like Jim has double Liliana the Veil in hand, which isn't really what you want against a green-white human deck. A card like Doom Traveler really trumps Liliana.
Yep. And after a Plains passes back over and Christian drops an Honor the Pure, swings in for 6.
That's a lot of damage.
But it looks like he did not find a third land. His deck functions pretty well without the...
I mean, he only has 8 cards in... he only has 11 cards in his main deck that cost more than 2, so... Yeah.
But it keeps him from really powering out a couple of spells a turn and putting Jim really far behind. Liliana comes down. Christian has to decide how he wants to handle it, sacrificing either one of his human tokens or his Doom Traveler. Doom Traveler would bring a spirit back into play, but kind of opens them up a little bit to any sort of mass removal. Gets rid of the puny human token.
I like that. Coming in for 6 again.
Another Honor the Pure. Makes Christian's little team seem a little more threatening. And he has a choice here as to whether he wants to take out Liliana or whether he just keeps coming after Jim.
I think you go after Jim. I mean, Liliana, when it's ticking up, is definitely hurting Jim more than it's hurting Christian right now.
And
Christian's stuck on 2 lands. He's got a bunch of cards stranded in his
with
hand.
only 1 counter on there, it also actually protects Christian from Jim having a second Liliana, which he doesn't know, but we do. Jim's got.
Does. Yep. Jim needs an answer this turn.
Now Jim's got a Forbidden Alchemy in his hand that's not going to help.
Hypothetically, could Forbidden Alchemy into something like Deadweight, but...
It seems... I think he still needs a land, so he'd need to hit the land and Deadweight, and if he had either of those, although he's got a Dark Slick Shores, but that's going to come into play tapped.
Is that a swamp there?
Island up in the corner? It's possible that he's got a land, but it is possibly hiding at the back. So he is going to Forbidden Alchemy. We're looking at land... 2 land, Oblivion Ring, and is that a Thought Scour?
It is.
That doesn't look like any help for him. He's going to take the Oblivion Ring.
Yeah, and after playing a land...
And there is a swamp there, so he was probably looking for that Deadweight. Although right now, that Deadweight doesn't kill anything.
That's true. And it keeps him alive. I guess he needs to find a... he does survive 1 turn on board, so maybe he's just looking for a Wrath. But even then, you're going to be forced to Wrath and then tick down your Liliana. Yeah. If he didn't attack your Liliana, it's...
Yeah, so he'll tick up Liliana. Pitch and pitch.
And if Christian has another Honor the Pure in hand...
Island. And passes over.
Which I thought I had seen. The game just ends.
3rd land and Honor the Pure, number 3. Jim asks whether he would like to go after his Liliana.
Yeah.
And Christian decides instead to just end the game.
Yes. Christian decides. You'd be surprised how often you ask somebody, like, who are you attacking? And they're like, huh. What does that mean if he's asking me that? I better attack this Planeswalker.
So we saw a fair amount of cards from Jim that are not really optimal in this matchup. I think the Liliana's really tough against any sort of deck that's going to kick out a bunch of guys. And also, I'm not sure that Forbidden Alchemy is gonna be timely enough.
Yeah, I mean it's really mana intensive, especially when you're against a deck that's applying this much pressure this fast.
On turn 3, if that's what you're
Somebody
doing,
with a cow hat
you're
of
just
all
really
things.
in tough. You're really in tough shape. So coming out of the board, I think he's got a Day of Judgment that definitely needs to come in.
And the timely reinforcements are also really strong here.
Yep, certainly.
A Doomblade definitely coming in, a Batterskull definitely coming in, and an interesting card is Curse of Death's Hold, because Curse of Death's Hold is in this sweet spot in Jim's deck where if Christian doesn't have an Honor of the Pure, Curse of Death's Hold is far and away the most powerful thing that Jim can be doing.
Absolutely.
But if Christian does have an Honor of the Pure in play, Jim is spending 5 mana at sorcery speed for a disenchant.
Yep. Now, one of the things that can happen is with his Oblivion Rings, if he has a Curse of Death's Hold out against an Honor of the Pure, he can actually set up a situation where Christian thinks he's safe playing cards, and
he can take the Honor of the Pure away. And
if he takes
board.
the Honor of the Pure away, he can really make a big impact on the board. Now, Dissipate seems way too slow. Nihil Spellbomb's not going to do anything, but it looks like he's got a few creatures to bring in. Now, he's got Elish Norn up at 7, but I'm not sure that he can reasonably expect to get there.
Well, yeah, I mean he's got to keep it in though.
Yeah,
it's his cruel ultimatum, and that's kind of what Jim's deck is trying to do. He's stalling the game out with cards like Lingering Souls, cards like Oblivion Ring, Day of Judgment, Deadweight, even Ratchet Bomb. So he's got a lot of stuff to interact with these small drops, but Christian's guys have a lot of different angles. Like just that Doom Traveler, just the trigger on Doom Traveler, completely won Christian that game. That made Jim have to play a certain way. It just had like this massive board presence.
Now,
just so funny. A 1/1 for 1.
The choice that Christian had to make between sacrificing one of his 2 human tokens or sacrificing the Doom Traveler, I think that a lot of players would sacrifice the Doom Traveler because they know they get something back out of it.
Yeah, and then, oh my gosh, I have another Honor of the Pure next turn. Like now I'm attacking for 9. But Christian wisely recognized, well, I have 2 Honor of the Pures in my hand, so the clock is actually the same if I sacrifice this guy, and I make myself resistant to a card like Day of Judgment, or a card like Black Sun Zenith.
Yep.
For example.
So he retains resiliency that is definitely important in this matchup because
and it doesn't affect his clock.
Yeah. I think that what's going to be interesting is if Christian gets ahead, he's in great shape. But if Jim can get even around turn 4 or 5, I think that actually this matchup's going to tip in favor of Jim.
Yeah, I think
he has much more powerful single cards to play. Christian's got to be on his front foot for this matchup.
Yeah, I mean Jim really needs to draw his inexpensive spot removal, and if he's able to draw timely reinforcements, which he only has 2 copies of, it's going to put him in a really good spot.
That's one of those cards that I think was. It was all over sideboards a few months ago, and it really kind of has faded a bit. But and now you see people with, I've got 1 copy or I've got 2 copies. Its power level against some of these decks is really high, and I think that Cavern of Souls, as we were talking about, bolsters a lot of the decks that it's really strong with against. And I think you're going to start seeing it showing up in higher quantities.
The realest of deals. I'm surprised that card isn't just a 4 of every sideboard that can support it. That's something
if your plan is to get behind, and Jim's plan is not to be ahead on life or really ahead on creatures anytime before turn 5 or 6 at earliest.
Yeah, Vexing Devils sold out across the internet.
Yes.
You should introduce Vexing Devil to timely reinforcements because the interaction between those 2 cards is very imbalanced. One of these beats the other one very hard.
Now, I'm really interested to see if someone can, and Patrick Sullivan, this is going out to you, if someone can put together the mono red deck that really wants to be there right now, but doesn't seem to have quite surfaced.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's probably an angle to be had. I don't think people aren't going to be flying as much in this format. I think Lingering Souls is definitely going to see less and less play. the decks that can support Lingering Souls properly are really punished by Cavern of Souls.
That's fair, absolutely.
And as a result, I think the skies are going to be pretty wide open. And a red deck that uses cards like Chandra's Phoenix and maybe even the new Dragon, the 4/4, can be really strong. Because a lot of the cards that people are trying to interact with their opponent, like, everything's becoming sorcery speed. They were having a lot less instants.
Looks like Jim is once again sending it back. So
that's not good for him.
We've had I believe that is the second mulligan for Jim here, so he may be going to 5 at this point.
And are these players X and 1 now, or XO still? Do we have that information?
I'm not sure. We're gonna get that info for you.
Yeah, but it's looking like Christian's in a pretty good spot to move right up into the top of the standings.
Christian with a knowing look into the camera.
A decidedly bovine stare.
And Jim's deck is the one that absolutely cannot afford to be going down cards. He needs to hit his land drops, and he needs to be playing powerful cards. And when you're dropping, when you're giving away cards through mulligans, it puts you in a really tough shape. Christian's deck, he ended that game with cards in hand, and he doesn't necessarily need all 7 cards in order to have that explosive start. Stall out on 2 lands, still has a really strong game, but Jim doesn't have that.
Yeah, I mean, he has 12 1-drops and 7 2-drops, or 11 if you include the other. So an Avacyn's Pilgrim, Christian leads things off again.
Jim led with an isolated Chapel, tapped, passed over to Christian, who Razorverge Thicket, threw out an Avacyn's Pilgrim, and actually he's the one who's ramping. So a Sea Chrome Coast from Jim, passes back over. As we said, not a whole lot of action that he's going to be able to produce in those first couple of turns. And the question is whether Christian can get out ahead. Jim's short on cards this game. Loyal Cathar from Christian. And Avacyn's Pilgrim is going to
get in the red zone for 1 damage. Yeah, putting Jim down to 19. That's a little telling about Christian's hand, so Jim can make some inferences. Jim now knows that Christian does not have a Mirror Crusader, and he can also know that his opponent does not have Champion of the Parish in his hand.
Yeah, he also probably doesn't have 1-drops, because with Avacyn's Pilgrim getting in, I think that, and with Jim on a 5-card hand, you'd see Christian kind of pushing a bit more if he had more to throw out there. Especially if he had a Doomed Traveler who is going to be resilient to what Christian's got to assume is Day of Judgment that's come in from Jim's sideboard.
But Christian does have Hero of Blade Holds in his deck. Loyal Cathar, pretty resilient to the Wraths.
Yep.
I think that's what Christian's thinking about right now. He's thinking, all right, do I play my hero into a Day of Judgment, or do I just play an Honor of the Pure and get him for 4 here?
And so here's Gavany Township from Christian, which brings him up to 4 available mana.
Attention players in Commander Pod number 4. Your event's about to begin. Please come see me up here on the stage. If you registered for Commander Pod number 4...
And if he's lucky enough to have drawn a Doom Traveler, then the Honor of the Pure play becomes, Thalia. That's a really good one here.
Jim looks at his hand, hoping that there's something in there, and I'm not sure that Forbidden Alchemy is the answer that he wanted there.
No.
So the Liliana stayed in, and the Forbidden Alchemy. So I'm not sure what must have been pulled out here. It's both the cards that we looked at and said these are probably the first ones to come out. He's played a Forbidden Alchemy, and one of the cards that he is looking at right now is Liliana of the Veil.
Well, we figure he only has 5 cards to bring in. He has 4 alchemies main. He could have just trimmed a Liliana and trimmed some alchemies, and then gone down to something like, like 2 Day of Judgment, because Day of Judgment not the best against Christian. He'd rather have things like Oblivion Ring, or maybe you don't bring in the 4th day. You really just want timely reinforcements. You really just want Elish Norn.
Now, the difference between 4 and 7 mana
it's a big difference.
Is whether or not you're going to get a chance to play it. I think in this matchup, Jim taking a long time to try and figure this out. Looks like he will keep the Planeswalker, Liliana of the Veil. Sends a Ratchet Bomb and Unburial Rites and a land?
I believe it's an Evolving Wilds.
An Evolving Wilds. Loyal Cathar number 2.
Oof. Makes things really hard for Jim now.
Follows up the Talia. And not a ton that Talia affects for Christian. He's got the 4 Honor of the Pure, 3 of which we saw last game. Then 3 Oblivion Rings, 3 Gather, and that's in his main deck. And we didn't talk about what he might have brought in. I'm not sure that there's a ton. Perhaps the Fiend Hunters to deal with Jim's larger creatures, just essentially as Oblivion Rings number 4 through 6.
I'm actually somewhat surprised here by Christian's choice of lines. I guess, no, this is definitely better.
So Liliana of the Veil comes down and forces Christian to sacrifice.
So he's probably just going to sacrifice the Avacyn's Pilgrim. It's the play that guarantees him to win the most. Oh, huh. I thought he had an Honor of the Pure in his hand, so I'm surprised that's what he chose to sacrifice.
Now, I think that's the more aggressive play there, but as we saw last time, if you're scared of mass removal, you want to keep those creatures that are resilient to it around. And the Cathar going away, and so it looks like he's sending the Pilgrim towards Liliana, and then everybody else going towards Jim. So that's in for 8 on Jim. That's a pretty big hit.
Yeah, I mean, Jim down to 9 already here. And he's staring down lethal right now. There's a Thalia on the other side of the table. That's a pretty scary place to be.
Now, he is going to be able to get up to 5. I don't think that's a Day of Judgment, though. Trying to... Timely reinforcements? Nope. 4 for...
maybe a Lingering Souls.
Yes. There you go.
Yes, Lingering
Right,
Souls.
Lingering Souls. And Talia makes that harder.
Yes. Thalia is just incredible against Lingering Souls. A 5 total cost and a 7 total cost.
Very big difference.
Huge difference.
So now one of these spirit tokens is actually going to be able to take out the Unhallowed Cathar if you'd like to. Other one probably just saves him 3. But you're saving 2 damage rather than 3 damage, plus you also get to take something out. So that's probably the way to go. Expecting to take 4 here unless Christian can follow up with something else that's going to push damage through. It's another Avacyn Pilgrim and 3 other cards in Christian's hand.
Yes, so Christian coming in for what would be lethal, but Jim will obviously have blocks here.
All right, so on Christian's side, we've got an Unhallowed Cathar, that's a 2/1, and an Avacyn's Pilgrim coming in. And then we've got Talia.
Guardian of Throbbin.
And Loyal Cathar, which are both pumped by Christian's Honor of the Pure. So they both have 3 power. Talia's a 3/2 first striker. And Loyal Cathar, the reason it's staying untapped is that's got some vigilance over there. Jim Davis controlling 2 spirit tokens, trying to figure out where the best place to put him is to extend this game and see whether or not he can. I think he's just trying to rip Day here.
I mean, the best play. I don't know. Jim's in a really rough spot here. Because even if he rips Day, he's got to put himself in a spot where he's going to be at greater than 3 when he passes back afterward.
So I think if you jump in front of the Unhallowed Cathar, you jump in front of Talia, you're going to take 4, you're going to wind up at 5. If you can pull the Day, and I think that you're on outs at this point. You're playing to your outs. You'll wind up with another Unhallowed Cathar off of the Loyal Cathar that Christian controls, but you do have Lingering Souls in the graveyard, so the next turn you're going to be able to make a couple more spirits. Hopefully at that point you're playing towards getting to Elishnorn.
Yeah, if you can actually get your Elishnorn online, then the world is your oyster. Until then, this is really difficult. It's one of the reasons why control decks are so difficult to play in the new format. More land taunt and cards like Loyal Cathar and Doom Traveler, which make it so hard to play a 1-for-1 game with your opponent.
Yeah, right now, especially White has a lot of tools for being resilient to the mass removal that has traditionally been the bane of this style of deck. All right, and so the blocks are the way that we expected. He takes out the Unhallowed Cathar, saves himself 3 damage, takes 4, dropping down to 5. And Christian passes back over. He does have an Avacyn's Pilgrim in his hand, but I think he's playing around Jim's outs. He knows that Day of Judgment is where Jim needs to go right now, and if he does, he wants to be able to follow it up with a little bit more pressure.
Which is great. And it's nice to see players thinking about the future of the game and the way the future turns are going to unfold instead of just playing the cards they draw.
I think there's a lot of players who look for how do I win next turn, and a lot of times that's absolutely the right way to go, because there are times when you want to say to your opponent, you have to get your out now. Like if you take away a draw step to get the out, that's sometimes the right choice. But if you have a consistent and reasonable way to play around their out and to be ready to recover from it, that can often be the correct play, because if you're putting on enough pressure that they still have to make reactive plays already.
If you can prevent them from playing the only card they can play to win, then you win.
So 3 from Christian for another Honor of the Pure, or 3 from Christian to not. I think Christian here is thinking about, if I just send everybody in, that Pilgrim is not all that important to his board. If Jim wants to trade there, take it and go down to 2, that actually once again removes Day of Judgment as an out, because that Loyal Cathar is going to come back as an Unhallowed Cathar, which swings for 2.
I like that play a lot. Let's see if Christian decides to go with that. He also has another Honor of the Pure in his hand, it looks like.
Looks like he's going to draw it back. He is going to use that Avacyn's Pilgrim as the 3rd mana to play a second Honor of the Pure, which makes both of them 4. Jim's going to block them both, stay at 5, once again playing to his outs. And Christian is now going to try and put a little bit more pressure on the board, plays his second Avacyn's Pilgrim.
And the second Avacyn's Pilgrim there, pretty good. It means that double removal spell isn't good enough for Jim. Jim is actually going to need triple removal spell or Day plus removal spell.
Yeah.
Day plus removal spell is really hard to achieve when your opponent has a Thalia in play.
It also sets up Day's still out a little bit, but it took Lingering Souls away.
Yes. But things are looking really good for Christian in his green-white humans deck. It's a pretty cool deck. I think the most important card from the new set is Cavern of Souls, which Christian plays 4 copies of.
Yep.
And he's X1 here in round 7, 5-1.
Now, do you think that something like the Silverblade Paladin might make it into this deck?
Yes, that card is very strong.
Because right now, Christian looks like this is a deck from 2 weeks ago that he said, you know what would be really good in this? Cavern of Souls. But do you what other cards might be showing up in builds like this going forward?
Yeah, I think Silverblade Paladin is definitely a card to watch out for. With Champion of the Parish, it kills people the turn that you're going in. So Jim is able to...
Forbidden Alchemy into flashing back a Lingering Souls that was dropped in the bin. He also hit another Lingering Soul, so he has that available for him next turn. At this point, he's got to block the 2 4/4s.
Yeah.
Takes 2, goes down to 3. And Christian continues to apply pressure all the way through. Jim still technically on and out of Day of Judgment. Elish Norn is also good. He's got the Day. I think he got that off of the Forbidden Alchemy. The Day of Judgment also is going to free him from Talia.
It's true.
So he's going to be able to do that, and then he's going to be able to flash back the Lingering Souls. And he's actually going to be in a...
Oh, he's stabilized.
In a reasonable position after that flashback, because that Cathar is going to come back, but all it does is trade with one of the tokens. And for those of you watching at home, there are no earthquakes up here in Providence. We just have some spectators who are not respecting the "please don't lean on the tent" sign.
Yeah, they have a loose understanding of the meaning of lean.
All right, so Christian follows up with an Avacyn's Pilgrim and gathers some townfolk.
You gather the townsfolk, making 3 3s now.
A little bit better.
Yeah.
Now Jim has a
Pretty
Sun
good.
Titan in his hand, and there's Sun Titan number 2. So he can bring back Liliana. I'm trying to think what else he can bring back. He could bring back Ratchet Bomb, which would be that'd be pretty good right now.
Does not seem like it would be bad.
Ratchet Bomb's actually going to be able to take out 2 tokens and the unhallowed Cathar, because none of the night sides have a casting cost.
Yeah. The converted casting cost is 0.
So Christian tried to put some pressure on and winds up in a really tough place. Jim gets in with his spirit tokens before they leave. Christian looking at this board and has to think that this this board state looks so good about 30 seconds ago. I guess we'll swing with everything and then pick them up and put them in the graveyard. Let's remember those spirit tokens on Jim's side. Hero of Blade Hold from Christian.
Hero of Blade Hold is another card that gained a massive amount of strength from Cavern of Souls.
Certainly.
I mean, it's already so good against the red decks, and now that a blue deck can't counter it, it's super dangerous. If you want to tap with it, it's really hard to lose.
Best way to handle it is counter it. Oblivion Ring drawn by Jim, and he's got to be breathing a sigh of relief, because even with another Sun Titan to play and a Sun Titan to attack with, he didn't have all that much to kind of bring out of his graveyard. He's got the Liliana and he's got the Ratchet Bomb, which he's already used once. But that Ratchet Bomb, he wants to tick it up. I think he wants to go after the Honor of the Pures. But that Ratchet Bomb's no use against the hero, and all Liliana was going to do is take out the Pilgrim. And then after an attack without the second Sun Titan puts him in really bad shape. That Oblivion Ring just solves all the problems, because now he gets to bring back the Liliana and get the Hero of Blade Hold. And Christian has gone in 2 turns from in relative control of this game to dead on the board.
That's what Esper Control does. Takes the game and turns it around. So you're looking for is that turning point.
Stabilize.
Something somebody said to me, I think it was Brad, said to me once, the thing about playing control deck is when you win, you feel like it was so far from being close at all, and when you lose, it always feels like you just got squeaked out.
You're always 1 turn away from taking control. That's where you wind up. That's why Christian just needs to be on that front foot. He needs to get in every point of damage that he can. And
but it looks like we'll be going to game 3. It seems very.
Jim was definitely on the defensive the entire game. Two Doom Traveler from Christian. And remember that those are 3/3s.
And this actually puts Jim in a little bit of a dangerous spot because he can't attack.
Well, he's got the Ratchet Bomb that he can bring back that handles the spirit tokens.
That's true.
So at this point, he swings
he can kind
in,
of do whatever he wants
and
at this point, you're right.
Christian gets to decide how he wants to handle that. But that Ratchet Bomb recursion is very powerful against this deck. And if Christian holds back, Jim can have that Ratchet Bomb in play, tick it up once at the end of the turn, use it next turn to destroy the Pilgrims, Doom Travelers, and then Christian says, "You know what? Let's try this again. I like being on the play. I think I can do this better the next game."
That's a close game. Very well played by Jim.
Yep, both players reaching for their sideboards, looking to see. I think that Jim may probably change some things with Christian being on the play. I think that there are definitely cards that change value on that when you're going to be able to get to that 4 in front of his Hero of Blade hold, or you're going to be able to, or whether you're going to be having to be reactive. Talia pushes your Day of Judgment to 5, and if that means that it's pushed back that extra turn, where Christian can get in a couple more attacks, that really hurts you on this side of it.
It's just backbreaking, especially if Christian's able to go Champion of the Parish into Thalia.
Absolutely. Now, Champion's actually a card that Christian's playing 4 of, but we haven't seen yet this match.
The last match we watched from him, he had it on turn 1.
One of the powerhouses of this archetype.
Yeah, and one of the powerhouses of the block, really. I mean, with Silverblade Paladin, it's a 2-turn clock. Very, very scary thing. Where Silverblade Paladin does a lot of damage. A lot of damage.
So Jim Davis pulls out game 2. Definitely was on his back foot for most of the match, but was able to turn it around with a late Day of Judgment and a pair of Sun Titans. Ratchet Bomb was absolutely key, and Christian has got to be feeling like he had one slip away there.
Yeah, Ratchet Bomb really pulling through there for Jim. The Ratchet Bomb Sun Titan combination is something that a lot of decks have trouble dealing with.
Certainly, but especially Christian's deck, especially the Humans decks that have so many tokens, both off of the Gather Townsfolk, as well as Hero Blade Hold, Doom Traveler. Loyal Cathar, when it flips, essentially becomes a token.
Yeah.
And so all of them going down to a cold Ratchet Bomb, you don't have to build it up at all. Definitely a problem, even if you've got a whole bunch of 1-drops, Champion of the Parish, Doom Traveler, Avacyn's Pilgrim. So it can do damage regardless of whether you're heavy into your token draw. But it's also worth remembering that Jim did that out of I believe a double mulligan.
A double mulligan?
Yeah. Jim started at 5 for that game, so he was able to to pull it out and really make the best use of all his cards to.
And I think that's the thing that Jim's deck's able to do, especially if it has the play in this type of matchup. In game 1, Christian just kind of came out of the gates and was able to put Jim on the defensive, and Jim just had the wrong answers.
Yep.
And that's kind of what Christian needs to happen. Christian's cards are cards that require specific answers. Like Mirror Crusader, a lot of Jim's removal spells can interact with that. Doom Traveler, a lot of Jim's spells can interact well with that. Loyal Cathar. So Jim does have cards that can interact well with them. But he also has removal spells that don't. So the thing is, all these questions don't require generic answers.
Yeah.
They require specific answers. And that's a problem for a control deck in any format.
The difference between game 1, where on turn 3, Jim is looking for answers and has to play a Forbidden Alchemy cold on his turn to look, versus when he was on the play, he could play it in response to Christian's Talia, go looking for something that's going to help him answer it, and then follow up with Lingering Souls on the next turn.
That game looked really bad for him.
Such a different game, even though that didn't put him on this front foot. He just kept him from being dead before he had a chance to play his spells, which are just much more powerful than Christian's.
And that's the thing about Jim's deck. Jim's deck, for those early turns, it doesn't even really need to answer what Christian's doing. It needs to just not die.
Yep.
Because once he gets to the 6-7 mana range, his deck is just so much more powerful, and he's going to trump what Christian is doing.
Yep. It's about stabilizing, ideally stabilizing around that turn 4 or 5. That's why Day, I think, it's so important. Even if it just takes some damage off the board, and you still have, Christian has a lot of things that are resilient today, but even if all it does is essentially use up that resiliency and cut down on it, flipping a Loyal Cathar is actually surprisingly good with the amount of pump that Christian has for white creatures. Honor, if there's an Honor of the Pure, it actually saves you a lot of damage. The Loyal Cathar is 2/2. Mm-hmm. The Unhallowed Cathar is 2/1, which is really big.
Which is also important when Sun Titan races start. So
against Jim, I think that the not blocking is not as important as the dying to a Lingering Souls token.
Yeah.
And so you can when you can block and take something off the board, that's much more important than just being able to chump.
Yeah, I mean once it becomes once the Loyal Cathar flips over, it only costs 1/4 of a card for Jim to deal with it.
Yeah. And now Christian looks like this is going to be his turn to go to 5, and we're gonna get to see whether or not his deck can come out of the gates. I think it is a deck that can recover from a mulligan to 5, especially on the play. He can put some early pressure on the right draw. He doesn't need all his cards to win.
Yeah, and I mean that's it's going to be rough for him to win on 5 cards regardless. He's on the play. It's going to make him have some awkward mulligan decisions, and the top of his deck really has to be kind to him. So he's got a hefty task in front of him. Do we think that's a real cow head on his head? Is that
Don't think so.
Is that real?
All right, so Christian leads off with the champion of the parish that we were talking about. And so let's see whether he can do this. This is double champion. This is one of the draws that he can have where he does not need a whole bunch of cards to have a whole bunch of action. 2 lands into the bin off a Thought Scour for Jim.
Let's see what he has in his
hand. And he looks over, surveys his hand, plays a Sea Chrome Coast, and passes back. Again, not a whole lot of action coming from the first couple of turns. Talia following up the double champion. Did he pick these 5 cards?
It looks like he may have picked these 5 cards. If the next turn he plays a 3rd land and casts Gather the Townsfolk, then he probably picked it.
And Jim declining to play Monoleak, I think that's probably greatly influenced by the presence of Cavern of Souls. Definitely. If you don't expect to be able to counter things, why play cards that counter things?
is something Chris Lockman was saying to me, is that all the blue decks are siding out their counter spells against him because he just uses counter for spells in game 1, and then game 2 against the blue decks he's playing ramp. He just hides in Karn. They don't have counter spells. Okay,
And
so Christian getting in for 5 here.
on turn 2. Swamp from Jim.
Or
And
turn 3. He missed the second land
passes-
drop early on.
Passes over. Doom Traveler. So let's just keep these guys going. Get in there.
Yep.
And Doomblade for
coming in
Talia.
now. So Jim down
Still
to 6
getting
here.
hit pretty hard here. This is a pretty good 5, but Christian all out. No cards needed.
And is there a Day of Judgment in Jim's hand? Because if there is, he's in a good spot. But if there's not, he just loses.
Well, got rid of Talia, and I think that's what he was thinking of. He needs a white source and Day here, and I don't think he has it. He does have Liliana, but that's not good enough. He's got a Phantasmal Image, which at least blocks something.
Yeah, I think
He's got a Sun Titan, which is doing nothing. Yep, so Phantasmal Image is going to copy, I would expect, Doom Traveler. There you go. There's an Evolving Wilds, which is going to get him his second white. And then he's still on the Please God Draw Day of Judgment plan. Block the big one. There you go.
Yeah.
Let's get a Spirit. Still
falling down to
taking
2.
4. Evolving Wilds going away. We're going to see a Plains coming out here, I would have to expect. Yep. And that Talia going away off that Doomblade was really important. He could have saved a bit more damage by knocking out one of the champions, but he needed the Talia. Yep, he needed the Talia off the board in order to move his Day of Judgment forward a turn. He's got a Forbidden Alchemy. It looks like he's got 2 Sun Titans in hand. Those 2 Sun Titans may be really good down the road, but that card needs to be not Thought Scour.
Hypothetically, you could Thought Scour into a Day of Judgment this turn.
I believe that it's a Dark Slick Shores in hand, so I think he doesn't have a land that comes in untapped.
The third from the
Possible.
right.
All those blue-black lands look the same to me. So he could theoretically Thought Scour into it if he does have that land.
He does. He has an Isolated Chapel.
Isolated Chapel. All right, so that's going to come in untapped. But he is going to, I think what he's looking to do is actually Forbidden Alchemy, hit a Lingering Souls, and then flash it back.
And that could be good.
Because that gives him a little bit more play on his outs. Because that gives him 4 cards to hit a 4 of, rather than, and that is not it. That is not it. That is not it. And that is not it. However, he gets to keep an image which he can use to copy and stay at 1. Give himself another set of outs. Now next turn, he is not going to be able to, although copying the Doom Traveler again means that that's essentially going to stick around an extra turn. And Lingering Souls does remain an out unless Christian can put some more pressure on the board.
If Christian has an Honor the Pure here, the game ends, but it doesn't look like he does, so he's just going to be able to put Jim down to 1.
With 5 of them between games 1 and 2.
Yeah, can't really complain.
It's about time to not have it. And Talia comes down, and that is very rough. This needs to be a day. So that Phantasmal. So this is gonna Sun Titan, bringing back Image. Now the question is, yep, Image copying Sun Titan, copying Sun Titan. What's the second Image copying here?
I'd assume it's Sun Titan.
Yep, copying Sun Titan. So, that's pretty good.
Very good. Is that token in play for Jim? There on the side?
Yes, that's a spirit. So, Hero of Bladehold. So, that's another image and another Sun Titan in his hand. So this is Team Sun Titan, folks. But that is 3 Sun Titans and a spirit, and that is not lethal.
Nope.
He could hit
one
with
short.
all of those, and Christian does not need to block at all. And so Hero of Bladehold needs to be dealt with.
Now, hypothetically, he doesn't. He just needs to hit a Wrath right now, because Christian can just bash through with the Hero Blade Holds and just.
He has 7 potential attackers right now, with the hero bringing in 2 more, and so that means Jim either needs 7 blockers, or he needs a way to Wrath away.
Well, yeah, he can use
we can't see the full graveyard right now, but I think that all he has to bring back with a Sun Titan is lands. He's going to make another one with another Phantasmal image, but he's doing the count, and I don't know that he likes these numbers. So he chooses to use his image to get rid of Talia, and that means he's going to be able to bring it back as a Sun Titan. He's going to Thought Scour, hoping to put another target in the bin. 2 lands gives him another target, but not quite what he was hoping for.
Yeah, really hoping to hit something like a Lingering
So another
Souls
Thought Scour off of the Thought Scour puts 2 cards that we can't see into the bin.
Frustrating.
And there's Elish Norn.
Can make a huge difference in this game.
But he's got to get it into play. That means he's got to survive. So right now,
1 more turn. That's all he needs. If he had a Ratchet Bomb in yard, it would be good enough because he would be able to.
What do we got? He's got a Deadweight to bring back. So he's got an image, a Deadweight, and a land. Now he's got 3 land, right? He's going to get another land off of the image.
So he could just get Dead Weight also, though. Right? He gets multiple triggers, and then he goes in, and then... Yeah, I mean, now Jim looks like he's got pretty solid control. I mean, this is what we were talking about before with Christian's deck. He just doesn't have any reach.
He still only has 5 blockers right now. And Christian can just say, I will take all of that. Or he can choose to block and get a spirit. He essentially, by blocking with the Doom Traveler, keeps the same amount of attackers. It's still only 5 blockers right now?
Yeah, I thought that... Okay, so... Lingering Souls plus Flashback from Jim, though.
Jeez, there you go.
That's what he had drawn that turn. That's what
All right.
Yeah.
And so now, that is enough blockers.
Yeah, so those spirits are off the table, but it is enough blockers, and then next turn Jim is going to get
3 spirits up at the top, so he's actually got 7, and Christian only has 6 potential blockers. 6 potential attackers, and I think you just lose to 4 Sun Titans.
4 Sun Titans is a lot of giants.
He did still need that Lingering Souls in order to get out of range of that
what a
of
match,
that hero.
though.
But
Jim
wow,
got a 1 stabilizing, and stabilizing by the skin of his teeth.
Yeah, and stabilizing last game at 3.
Yeah.
I mean, with time just called, I don't think we're going to need the 5 extra turns, but here's another Hero of Bladehold.
Oh, and that actually can... Christian can chump effectively. Oh, no.
Elish
yeah,
Norn.
The game ends.
Yep.
Forgot about that one.
I'm not sure that he even needed it. It was going to be much more interesting without it, but it makes it... That's pretty easy.